Today I'm welcoming Roger Grimes, who is he is currently a security evangelist at KnowBe4, which is a security defense company. But the reason I'm talking to him is he's also become an expert in quantum computing and its effects on cryptography. And for those of you who are in the CYB 517 class, we're talking about symmetric keys, asymmetric keys. We're talking about how wonderful cryptography is and how it protects all of our data and keeps us all safe. So Roger's going to look over the horizon a little bit and talk about what is the potential effects of quantum computing on this sort of wonderland world that we have. But before I get into that, Roger's written a couple of really interesting books. This first one is A Data-Driven Defense. And I'm a big believer in this, using data actually to create your security program. And I did use that or refer to that in some other classes. But we're not talking about that this morning. We're going to talk about his latest book, which was published in 2019, The Cryptography Apocalypse. And so good morning and welcome, Roger.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone.
So first of all, let's see how we can introduce this subject. So quantum computing is in the news a lot. What's the big picture of what's going on here? People are where is quantum computing, and what are its likely effects on cryptography? I have read through this book. It is a difficult subject. Maybe give us a gentle introduction to this whole topic.
Okay, yeah. So the whole world works on quantum mechanics. For a long time, the idea is everything worked on classical Newtonian physics, basically built around gravity. And about the early 1900s, Einstein and Niels Bohr and some other people started to see things that were really they couldn't explain using gravity. And they started to discover these other quantum impacts, quantum mechanics. But they can only see them when they were looking at very small, what's called elementary particles. An elementary particle is something that can't be broken down into something smaller. So like an electron or a photon or a quark or boson or whatever it might be. But when they looked at those particles, it turned out that they operated sometimes 180 degrees different than anything we'd ever seen before. Sometimes it appears very magically. I mean, there's things like sometimes these particles will just appear out of nowhere and then disappear, or if any two particles touch each other, which there's trillions of particles colliding with each other every second of every inch of space around you, even inside of you, they get entangled in a way that they will forever, the rest of their lives, impact each other. And it was all this craziness. And it was debated for a long time about whether it was real or not. And now, over 100 years later, we've proven almost all of it is real. We don't know we don't always know how or why, but we know for sure that it's real, and it's one of the most proven sciences. And since the late 1990s, we've actually been building computers based upon that, which means you create these computers that use quantum particles. And the quantum particles, for most of the time inside of a computer, it's electrons. Most of the time, if we're doing networking, it's photons. But basically, instead of if you got a classical traditional binary computer, it just uses let's say a positive and a negative charge to store information. But in a quantum computer, you're actually using the quantum properties of quantum particles that essentially represents the ones and zeros. And the things that it gives us is a lot of things. First of all, just literally for the first time ever, a real ability to map how science really works. Up until this time, we didn't know, or we couldn't model it. We thought about it, but we couldn't model it because we didn't have quantum computers. And it also gives us, in a lot of cases, incredible speeds and capabilities that just aren't, capable of in the real world. And by that, I mean, they can do things in seconds to minutes that traditional computers cannot do for millions and millions of years. So sometimes there's these incredibly drastic computational speed ups. Again, you can do in seconds. So something that all the regular computers in the world couldn't do for millions of years. And then other times there's double speed ups and things like that. Some things they're actually slower at, but in many cases, there's all kinds of problems. If you can think of a problem where you're searching for X, I need to solve and find out what this number is. Quantum computers can typically at least double the speed that it takes to find X. So the impact in the cryptography world is that for many forms of traditional cryptography, it actually will immediately kind of break it. So for traditional, what's called public-private key asymmetric cryptography, it immediately breaks the traditional form, especially the ones that depend upon large prime numbers to work. And for symmetric key encryption, where you have the same key that encrypts and decrypts, it cuts the key's protective capability in half.
Okay, so if I remember your book right, and from what you just said, it's maybe some of the public key algorithms that might be more affected by quantum computing. The symmetric keys, yeah, it would cut the strength by half, but it seems like the public key would be more vulnerable. So what would be like a scenario? Do we see potential bad guys or hackers? What's a use case where somebody would actually have access to a quantum computer? I don't know if it's a nation state or some consortium of hackers. How would they use this, and what would they get out of it? Do we know enough to kind of paint a scenario of what would be happening?
Yeah, so so what is this? So when we talk asymmetric encryption and authentication and digital signing, it literally probably involves 99% of our world. For example, HTTPS TLS, that's what protects 90% of the internet. It immediately would break those things. It breaks most Wi-Fi security. It breaks credit cards, banking, cryptocurrencies, digital signatures, public key infrastructure, digital certificates. So literally, even in cases where we use symmetric key, many times those symmetric keys are transported using asymmetric algorithms between source and destination. So the use case scenario literally is probably 98% of our digital world. And you're looking at right now, there's well over 200 documented quantum computers that we know about. There's probably a lot more than that in nation states. The United States and China, billions of dollars each year trying to make the best quantum computer. So we already have quantum computers, but not super powerful. But likely, we've either got some that are super powerful and we just don't know about them that are being used by nation states, or we're very likely to get that. I mean, for example, Google's working on quantum computers. IBM is, Microsoft has 7 or 8 research centers worldwide dedicated to quantum computers, spending billions of dollars on it each year. So it's very much a competitive race. So the threat would be, let's say that a nation state has it. And let me say that I think that nation states already have these things. They could be, for competitive purposes, sniffing your Wi-Fi traffic and then reading it and finding out what's in it. And think about this. Well, suppose it's only 2 or 3 years away. If I'm a competitor and I know that in a couple of years I'm going to have access to a quantum computer that can break cryptography, I should be sniffing your traffic today. If I'm a nation state, no doubt the nation states are literally just sniffing up as much, Hoover vacuuming as much information as they can, so that when that capability comes about, either now or in a couple of years, it really, the furthest that it's likely out is 5 years, that they will then be able to read those secrets. Think and ask yourself, if you work for a company, how many secrets those companies probably have that they would not want their competitors and the rest of the world to know about in the next 5 years? And if so, you could have competitors or nation states vacuuming up that encrypted communications that are going to decrypt it once quantum computers get to the capability of being able to decrypt it.
I see. So I'm just painting some pictures in my mind. So one might be, if you had a quantum computer, you might want to go to high value data in motion transactions like the SWIFT banking system or something like that. You tap into that, you decrypt that or modify that data. Or I guess another possibility, companies are putting all of or a lot of their strategic information in the cloud. They think they have strong encryption with strong encryption keys. So from what I'm hearing, if first you'd have to get the data, right? If it was in the cloud, you'd have to access it, but it's not fully protected just because it's encrypted. It's not going to be protected forever. So a lot of these secrets could be sort of uncovered, I guess, right? Is that true?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And in 2016, NIST and the NSA and the National Science Foundation said for America, American companies should start preparing for the day when our traditional asymmetric encryption gets broken, starting now. So that's in 2016. So what I actually recommend in the book and to people is that you should start preparing by at very least taking a data protection inventory of your organization, identifying what critical data you have that you don't want to have compromised, figuring out what encryption is around it. Most people have no inventory. They have lots of software, hardware inventories, but they don't have a cryptography inventory to know what they will even need to replace when the day comes. So I recommend that everybody do a data protection inventory and go, okay, well, we've got RSA with 2048 bit here. We have AES 256 bit here, and so on. At the very least, to start preparing, start to take this data protection inventory. Then today, if there are critical secrets that you don't want leaked for 5 or 10 years, don't let them get on your network. Don't let them get in a wireless way that they can be sniffed, right? Because you think it's protected, but it may not be or may not be in the future. So keep them isolated like you do maybe like the PCI data, but even more so, you have to keep it in a way that a bad guy, a competitor, a nation state can't sniff that information. And then number 3, start to think about what encryption you need to increase the size of. So for example, the NSA says that any symmetric key algorithm that's 128 bits and bigger, because quantum computers will cut that in half and make it be equivalent to 64-bit, you should increase at least to 192 bits for any asymmetric algorithm. I think it's silly to go to 192. You should go to 256-bit because even NSA says, well, the 192 will get you a couple of years. Well, who wants a couple of years? I want, decades. So go to 256-bit.
No, that sounds like good advice. So I think our planning up to now is just said, okay, we have cryptography, we're done, it's working. So you're saying we have to understand what level do we have and then make plans for the future. But I have another question. Is there a positive side to this? Can quantum computing or new algorithms be used to build more quantum resistant protocols in the first place? So is that a flip side of this?
Yeah, first of all, just even outside of cryptography, quantum computers are going to give us all, I think it's going to create more cool inventions than the internet gave us. I mean, because it's just the first time that we're going to have better medicines, better battery storage, better search algorithms, better traffic management, better everything. But from a cryptography perspective, it's going to make more secure networks. And there are already more secure encryption algorithms today that, for example, NIST is already examining 26 different candidates, which are quantum resistant, meaning that because they don't have large prime numbers involved as their protection, they're not immediately crackable by quantum computers. And so we're going to get, we have, and we're going to get standards that are, they call them post-quantum, but resistant to quantum computing cracking. And long-term wise, we're going to have computers and networks that are a lot harder to eavesdrop on. In the quantum world, if somebody eavesdrops on your traffic, both parties could detect that. So it's funny, what you'll read all the time is that quantum networks are unhackable. No, you can hack them. It's just that if somebody does, both sides, the sender and the receiver, would know. And so it makes it less likely that Eve, the eavesdropper, would eavesdrop in the first place, because she would always be discovered and the parties involved would go, oh, we can't rely, if we were transmitting a symmetric key to use to do encryption, we know that symmetric key was compromised, and so don't use that symmetric key. At the same time, you can always prove that it wasn't compromised, and we can go ahead and use it. And it's an inherent property of quantum mechanics, so it's very difficult to get around. If somebody eavesdrops on it, sender and receiver more than likely will know. And so it's going to decrease the amount of hacking against encryption over the long term.
That's fascinating. So just in summary, what are there sort of milestones or events, or what do you think will be happening in this field of quantum computing and crypto, let's say over the next 12 months? Are things sort of on the increase, or what's going on right now that you think is exciting in this field?
Yeah, so one thing is that Google achieved quantum supremacy about 6 months ago, but they did it in a very basic way. Somebody else came up with the allegory. It was like the Wright brothers' first flight, that it was very basic. You almost couldn't call it quantum supremacy except for by the very basic definition it was. Well, it's kind of like the Wright brothers went from this 30-second flight, 45-second flight, to 30 years later, we were flying in jets, wearing suits, drinking caviar with flight attendants, right? I think in the next year, what you're going to see is more and more capability from quantum computers and more capability where they're actually solving real problems that we couldn't solve before. Certainly within a handful of years, we'll see that. And I think there's even, again, I think there's a chance that they've already had that capability. The nation states, China, United States have already created very powerful quantum computers, and we don't know about it, but you're going to start to see, the Microsofts and the Googles and the IBMs come up with quantum computers that we all can share in some type of cloud function. What you'll probably do is like drop off the quantum part of your problem to one of those cloud services. They'll solve it, send it back to you, and then you'll do the rest of the processing on a traditional binary computer. I think we're absolutely within a handful of years of all of us being able to participate and take advantage of quantum computers.
Thanks very much for that. I think in security, what we all need to do is look over the horizon, right? What new technology is coming along that's going to affect us? Because in any security program, it takes 1 or 2 years or more to get set of controls put in place. So I'm really excited to hear about this. I think we should all take it seriously and take a look at Roger's book. I'm going to get this on reserve in our library if you're on campus. I know not everybody is on campus, but thank you very much for Roger for your time, and thank you all for watching and listening, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.